Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the kind of story that history tried to sweep under the rug, or maybe bury under layers of soot. You step into a place that shouldn't exist anymore, where the air still smells faintly of something scorched, and the ground crunches beneath your shoes like brittle paper. You probably won't survive this one, at least not without getting a little singed in the imagination. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The town doesn't have a name anymore, at least not one you can find on a modern map. You walk along its empty main street, the asphalt cracked like sunburned skin, weeds pushing through as if nature's trying to write its own apology. The wind blows slow here, carrying a strange metallic taste, like breathing in old pennies and regret. Somewhere, a sign creaks on one hinge, the ghost of a diner menu still painted faintly beneath the rust. You pause beside a streetlight that flickers every few seconds. Each flash catches motes of ash drifting through the air, like snow that forgot it was winter. It feels staged, like someone left it this way on purpose, a scene preserved for whoever cared enough to look. You can almost hear laughter echoing from a vanished crowd, people who never got the memo that the world had changed. At first, it's just wind you hear, but then a soft hiss, a static pulse threads through the air. It's coming from an old radio sitting on a windowsill, its casing melted slightly, the knobs still sticky with soot. You turn it on, half expecting silence. Instead, a voice crackles through. All residents are advised to remain indoors until further notice. The broadcast loops, the same words repeating like a trapped memory. Then, a click, a pause, and for half a second, another voice underneath it. It's not contained. You lean closer, your reflection trembling in the dusty glass. Was it a warning, a confession, or just interference bleeding through time? Historians still argue whether any recording from that night actually survived, or if what people claim to have heard was just the mind's way of rewriting terror into signal. Some say the fire began from a lightning strike in an abandoned coal pit. Others insist it started in the industrial yard, a single spark from a welding torch landing on a trail of dry oil. The official report, though, was simpler. An unfortunate convergence of weather and human error. That phrase became the paper shield behind which the truth burned quietly for decades. You move deeper into the town, the street narrowing into what used to be a neighborhood. Mailboxes stand like gravestones, names faded but still legible if you squint. A child's tricycle lies half buried in ash, its handlebars warped. You imagine a family standing here watching the horizon go orange, thinking, like everyone does, that the fire will stop before it reaches them. And here's the strange thing. When archaeologists later sifted through this area, they found that most of the homes didn't collapse from heat. They were emptied. Furniture intact, doors left ajar, dinner plates still on tables, as if the people vanished before the flames ever touched them. The mystery of that exodus never made the headlines. It was too eerie, too un-American to fit the narrative of heroic recovery. A dog barks in your mind, or maybe memory, and for a heartbeat you can see the town alive again. Smoke curling gently from chimneys, the scent of coffee and engine grease. Then the image folds in on itself, consumed by the steady hum of wind against glass. You pick up a piece of charred newspaper, its text half legible. Local plant assures no danger to residents. And then the sentence ends abruptly, cut by flame. You stare at it, realizing this fragment of reassurance probably aired just hours before the inferno began. It's a strange thing walking through a place like this. You're not just trespassing on geography, you're trespassing on denial. Every brick, every cracked window frame whispers, "We thought we were safe." And that's the part history never quotes. Because if people knew how fragile the line between normal life and catastrophe really was, they might start asking uncomfortable questions. The radio static returns, louder this time, as if the signal is trying to form words again. You tilt your head, straining to listen. "If anyone can hear this..." The voice fades, then silence. The air feels heavier now, charged with something invisible, a residue of panic that time couldn't wash away. You look toward the horizon, where the sun's dying light turns the haze a dull red. For a split second, it looks like the fire is still there, waiting. You start walking again, though the road feels longer than before, stretching into that orange distance. The last thing you notice before the darkness swallows the town is a faint pattern burned on the side of a building, almost like fingerprints. Someone's hand pressed against the wall long ago when it was still too hot to touch. And maybe, in some small, cruel way, they left that print for you. A message that says, "We were here. We burned. Don't forget us again."
You keep walking, tracing a road that seems to breathe heat even now. Beneath your shoes, the pavement feels like a low fever, as though the earth hasn't quite forgotten what it did. A light breeze drags smoke-scented dust across your path, and you catch yourself coughing, not from the air, but from the memory of it. Because the report said people didn't die from the flames alone, they died from breathing, when oxygen itself turned traitor. You can almost feel it happen. Imagine it, the fire growing so vast, so hungry, it starts to make its own weather. The heat rises fast enough to pull air inward, like a lung collapsing in reverse. Wind howls toward the inferno, feeding it, thickening it. Scientists later called this a firestorm cell, a vortex of flame so hot it created tornadoes of burning debris. You might have seen that on disaster documentaries. But here, where you stand, it doesn't feel like science. It feels personal. The smell of melting paint, the crack of timber, the desperate hiss of oxygen leaving the world. Historians still argue whether this phenomenon began naturally or was fueled by buried chemicals, leftover fuel drums from an old wartime depot nearby. Some accounts mention a forgotten cache of magnesium powder stored illegally under tarps that no one ever checked. If that's true, then this wasn't just nature misbehaving, it was negligence waiting for a spark. You stop beside a chain-link fence half swallowed by weeds. On the other side lies what used to be a factory lot. The rusted sign is unreadable, but you can still make out 3 letters, A-C-M. Some conspiracy sites claim this was the Ames chemical manufacturing plant, one of the last in the region to produce fire-retardant coatings. Irony, right? The place that made fireproofing material may have been what set the whole sky on fire. You duck under the fence, your breath loud in the stillness. Every step stirs a faint shimmer of ash that swirls like fog around your ankles. Then you hear it, faint, like whispers underwater. Voices. You freeze. It's not the radio this time. It's human, low, repeating, rhythmic. You turn toward the sound and realize it's coming from underground. A vent pipe, half collapsed, hums softly with the wind. But the vibration forms patterns like speech. You kneel, placing your ear near the metal. "We can't get out. It's closing. They said stay inside." You jerk back, heartbeat pounding. You know it's impossible, just the wind whistling through a hollow pipe. Still, the words feel too real, too specific. Some survivors later said they heard things like that too. They claimed the fire wasn't silent, that it spoke. One man described it as 1,000 people screaming my name all at once. Others remembered voices of loved ones calling from the direction of the flames. Modern psychologists call that auditory pareidolia, the brain's way of finding meaning in chaos. But you can't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, sound travels differently through heat, that panic has an echo that never really dies. When the first government teams arrived days later, they found what they expected: devastation. But the strange part was how neat it all looked. Rows of houses burned identically, like someone had drawn the edges with a ruler. No signs of explosion, no scorch marks on nearby fields, just the town, erased clean down to its foundations. You read later in a declassified memo that aerial photos were to be destroyed after evaluation. Why? Nobody knows. The official reason was poor image quality. But one whistleblower described seeing streaks of light in the photos, unnatural, almost symmetrical patterns across the town's grid. He said it looked like a burn map drawn from above. That line never made it into print. The deeper you go into this story, the more you realize how quickly people started shutting up about it. Local newspapers printed obituaries, sure, but the national press buried the event under headlines about foreign politics and stock markets. It's as if someone wanted the country looking outward while the heartland smoldered quietly underfoot. And when the hearings came, because there are always hearings, they concluded acts of God and atmospheric instability were to blame. Not the chemical storage, not the outdated firefighting systems, certainly not the people who signed the permits. Acts of God. Convenient, isn't it, when negligence wears a halo? By the time compensation funds were discussed, most survivors had already moved away, their testimonies scattered like embers. One woman wrote in her journal, "They don't want our grief, just our silence." Containment by silence. It worked. For nearly 70 years, the firestorm faded from national memory. No documentaries, no history textbooks, just a few paragraphs in obscure geological journals and some whispered family stories about the night the sky caught fire. And that's how you end up standing here, decades later, breathing in the quiet that cost so much noise to create. The strange part is, it doesn't feel haunted, not exactly, more like unfinished. As you start walking back toward the road, something glints in the dirt, a fragment of glass, curved and clear. You pick it up, brushing off soot, realizing it's not just glass, it's part of a melted bottle, its surface warped into the faint outline of a human face. You turn it over, and for a half heartbeat in the reflection, you see your own. The firestorm changed everything, not just the land, but the way people thought about truth. What's easier, facing what happened, or letting it vanish under paperwork and prayer? You pocket the glass. Ahead, the road stretches into the dark. You start walking again, feeling the faint tremor of history moving under your feet, like the heartbeat of something that isn't done burning.
You keep walking north, the landscape shifting beneath your feet like a slideshow someone forgot to synchronize. The road widens, curves, and suddenly opens onto a suburban sprawl, a grid of neatly painted houses, trimmed hedges, and perfect lawns. But something's off. You know these shapes, the curve of the hill, the river bend, the way the telephone poles line up. You've been here before. Or rather, someone else has. The towns that vanished once were rebuilt exactly on top of themselves, as if nothing had happened. New names, new postcodes, new smiles for the cameras. Urban renewal, they called it. Progress, they said. But if you dig deep enough, literally, you find the old street foundations hiding beneath these driveways. A second city buried under the living one. Historians still argue whether that decision was born of pride or panic. Maybe both. Rebuilding on the ashes made sense politically. It showed resilience. It also erased the evidence. You pause beside a park sign that reads Elmwood Meadows, established 1953. Cute name. The original town, according to old maps, was called Elmsworth Hollow. You hold up the faded blueprints on your phone, overlaying them with GPS. The park's playground? Dead center on what used to be the fire's origin point. Kids swing there now, laughing in the same air that once boiled. Their parents scroll through phones, blissfully unaware that the soil under those benches still contains traces of carbonized brick and unburned fuel residue. You stand there for a while listening to the wind tug the swings, and for a strange moment, it sounds like breathing. Later, at the edge of the new development, you find a small photo shop, the kind that shouldn't still exist. The sign says Colorcraft Studios, though the neon C is dead. Inside, the smell hits you first. Dust, developer, and the faint sweetness of old acetate film. A bell tinkles as you step in. No one answers. Behind the counter sits a stack of photo envelopes, yellowed, addressed in looping cursive. You thumb through them until one catches your eye, stamped with the year 1952. You slide out the negatives, holding them to the light. The images are faint, but clear enough to see. Rows of houses, a church, a river bend. But here's the thing. They're in color. That shouldn't be possible. The official record says all documentation of the firestorm was black and white. Government archives even claim the technology wasn't locally available yet. So who took these? You tilt the film and catch something uncanny. Faint streaks of orange etched into the emulsion itself, light trails from moving flame. The photographer wasn't documenting the aftermath, they were inside the event. One frame freezes you, a person standing at the edge of the burning street, holding what looks like a camera. Their face overexposed, their outline haloed in light. The note scribbled on the envelope reads, "For L, if they ever tell the truth." You swallow hard. Maybe the photographer survived. Maybe they didn't. Either way, someone wanted this story seen. The more you look around this rebuilt town, the more it feels like a film set. The paint too clean, the symmetry too perfect, reconstruction as erasure. Plaques on walls tell stories of a small fire and the heroic recovery effort, but every line feels manicured, smoothed over like a PR statement. You find a bronze plaque outside the new library that reads, "To the memory of those lost in the Great Elmwood Incident, may we rise again stronger." Stronger, sure, but maybe dumber too. Because the deeper you look, the less these memorials remember. None mention how many people died, none mention the factory, or the sealed investigation files. Just broad words like resilience, community, faith. You get the sense these aren't markers of grief, they're speed bumps, slowing down curiosity. You glance at one woman placing flowers there, her face calm, maybe unaware of the full story. Or maybe she knows and prefers the gentler version. Sometimes forgetting is a mercy, sometimes it's a job. A local guide brochure catches your eye. Historic Elmwood Walking Tour. Learn about our town's bright past. You laugh quietly at that adjective. Bright, indeed. Still, you follow the map out of habit. One stop lists the old foundry wall, preserved from before the fire. You find it behind a grocery store, hemmed in by dumpsters and vines. The bricks are half melted, fused into each other like candle wax, and embedded in the surface, impossibly, are small objects, nails, coins, pieces of glassware. The heat had folded the town into itself, trapping fragments mid-melt. You touch the wall, feeling how smooth it is. It doesn't feel tragic. It feels tired, like it's been explaining itself for decades and no one's been listening. Somewhere behind you, a delivery truck backfires, and the sound bounces off the narrow alley in a way that makes it sound like a distant explosion. You flinch. Ridiculous, you tell yourself, but still your pulse jumps. Memory has long fingers. There is a fringe theory, whispered among local history buffs, that the firestorm wasn't entirely accidental, that some of the new land deeds, especially the ones held by reconstruction contractors, were drafted before the fire even happened. You find it hard to believe, but then again, a coincidence that profitable doesn't happen by itself. Historians still argue whether the government's urban renewal push of the 1950s was an effort to modernize or to sanitize. Some of these new towns look less like recoveries and more like restarts, experiments in selective memory. You stand at the town's edge again, where the houses give way to open field. A faint shimmer rises from the ground, just heat distortion maybe, or something older, resurfacing. For a fleeting second, you can almost see both towns at once, the living one and the ghost beneath. Their shapes overlap, their roads aligning perfectly, like one memory printed over another. Then a gust of wind scatters dust across your vision, and the illusion fades. You blink, realizing the sun's dropping low, turning the air amber. Somewhere a swing squeaks again in the park behind you. The sound is soft but persistent, rhythmic like a metronome for everything history forgot to count. You take one last look around before moving on. The wind shifts, and you swear you hear that same faint whisper again, the one from the radio, the pipe, the ashes. We were here. And then, nothing but the quiet hum of a town pretending not to remember. You leave the reconstructed town behind, following the faint hum of highway lights toward what used to be the state capitol's archives. The drive feels endless, a tunnel of sodium lamps flickering overhead, each one catching a glimpse of your reflection in the glass. By now, you know better than to expect truth from official records. Still, some habits die hard. You arrive at a low beige government building that looks allergic to personality. The sign out front reads, State Historical Annex, Restricted Access. Perfect. The kind of place where history goes to nap quietly behind red tape. Inside, the air is cold, dry, and smells like dust pretending to be important. You flash your researcher pass, a forgery, technically, but no one looks twice. The archivist on duty nods, bored, and waves you toward the lower level. Down there, under flickering fluorescent lights, you find what you're looking for, the 1952 Firestorm inquiry files, 3 metal boxes sealed with brittle tape. You take one to a table, unspool the tape, and lift the lid. Inside, 100 folders, each labeled in precise handwriting, but it's the memos on top that stop you. Recommendation: frame incident as meteorological anomaly. Avoid industrial implication. Phrase, suggestion, dry lightning phenomenon. Public reassurance, greater than technical accuracy. You sit back, staring at the words, the politics of forgetting. The deeper you read, the clearer the choreography becomes. Within days of the firestorm, congressional aides and insurance executives were already crafting the narrative, one that made the event tragic but blameless. If no one's at fault, everyone can move on. And so the hearings were a performance. The transcripts describe witnesses testifying about unusual heat waves, sudden updrafts, and acts of providence. None of the survivors' first-hand accounts, the screams, the strange lights, the vanishing families, were entered into record. Redacted lines cut across paragraphs like censor tape made of ash. Historians still argue whether those edits were driven by corruption or simply cowardice. Maybe the two are synonyms. You flip another folder open and find a letter marked confidential, not for release. It's from a local congressman to the state governor. Contain local panic. Frame as natural. Investigate privately re-industrial chemical reaction. Do not confirm unless compelled. You can practically hear the suits sweating over their typewriters. But then there's something stranger, an attached photograph. It shows the town taken from above, a wide shot, charred blocks forming geometric shapes. For a second, you think it's just burn patterns. Then you realize the darker areas line up too neatly. Triangular clusters, almost symmetrical, like a grid drawn on purpose. You trace them with your finger. The pattern matches military firebreak designs, the kind used for controlled testing. You laugh softly, the sound bouncing off the concrete. Of course it does. Some fringe researchers once claimed the Firestorm was part of an early civil defense experiment gone wrong, a test of urban fire control methods after World War II. Officially, that program never existed, but here, in your hands, are the fingerprints of design. The building hums quietly, as if listening. You move deeper into the archives, finding older boxes warped from humidity. Their paper smells sweet, almost metallic, as if the heat from that night seeped into the ink. You open one marked Local Clergy Correspondence. Inside are letters between church leaders, dated days after the disaster. One stands out, a sermon titled The Scourge as Salvation. The preacher wrote, "The Lord purifies through flame what man defiles through greed. Those who perished are not victims, but witnesses." You pause, staring at the page. It's beautiful in the way tragedy sometimes pretends to be wisdom. Historians still debate whether that preacher meant repentance or cover-up, because later, that same church received a large donation from the chemical company that owned the burned factory lot. Faith and finance, two flammable substances when mixed carelessly. You close the folder. Your fingers come away blackened, like you've touched a shadow that refuses to fade. Somewhere up above you, a ventilation fan kicks on, rattling dust loose from the ceiling. You freeze, heart racing, as the sound morphs into a low hum. For a second, it sounds just like the fire, the same rhythm of inhaling, devouring, exhaling. You close your eyes, forcing yourself to breathe slower, but the hum seems to echo your pulse, syncing perfectly until you can't tell where your heartbeat ends and the building begins. You whisper, maybe to the files, maybe to yourself, "We built this silence, didn't we?" The light flickers once, twice, then steadies. The hum fades. The archives go quiet again, as if pretending nothing happened. When you finally emerge into the night, the city outside feels too bright, too loud. Cars glide by, radios chattering, people laughing, all blissfully unaware that just below their feet lie shells of truth boxed and bound in paper. You look up at the skyline, its glass towers reflecting stars that aren't really there, just artificial light bouncing back from smog. America's favorite illusion, a heaven of its own making. A line from the preacher's sermon drifts back into your head. Fire reveals the shape of belief. Maybe he was right, just not in the way he meant. Because standing here now, you realize forgetting isn't a symptom, it's a system. And if memory burns too brightly, there's always another archive, another report, another convenient miracle to dim it again. Morning arrives not with sunlight, but with a pale, gray shimmer, the kind that seeps through dirty blinds and settles on your shoulders like old dust. You haven't slept. The files from the archives lie scattered across the motel desk, every page a wound that refuses to close. You tried sorting them, tried making sense of the sequence, the causes, the cover-ups, the corporate fingerprints,
But the story doesn't move in a straight line. It loops, curls back, devours its own tail, like fire. You stand by the window. Outside, the road stretches toward nowhere, an empty artery running through the heart of a country that built monuments to progress atop its own ashes. A delivery truck passes, trailing exhaust that momentarily catches the light. For a second, it looks like smoke from 1952, as if the firestorm never truly ended, only disguised itself as normal life. You turn back to the table. There's one last folder you hadn't opened, the thinnest one, almost forgotten. Inside, a single letter, handwritten in blue ink, dated 3 years after the event. To whoever still cares. They told us to stop asking, said the past was too heavy to carry, but the air here still smells of burning when it rains. You can't bury something that keeps breathing. No signature, no address, just that. You fold the letter and place it in your notebook. Maybe that's the only truth left, the smell of something unfinished. You hit the road again, driving north through landscapes that blur into one another, abandoned gas stations, towns that look like sketches left half erased, cornfields yellowing into dust. Every few miles you pass a memorial stone, a name, a date, a tragedy sanitized into civic poetry. We remember, never again, in honor of the fallen. But the truth is, America forgets on purpose. It's efficient that way. You can't build an empire on grief, so you build it on repetition instead. Same disaster, new name, cleaner logo. In a diner outside Toledo, the waitress refills your coffee without asking. She's humming something faint and familiar, a lullaby maybe, or a hymn. You catch a few words. Ashes fall, but morning calls. You ask her where she learned it. Oh, my grandma, she said. Said her mom used to sing it when the sky turned red one summer, long before I was born. You don't ask which year. You already know. The jukebox clicks. The hum of the old neon light above the counter sounds too close to the tone you heard in the archives, that steady, mechanical breath, like the world remembering itself in whispers. You realize it then. This story was never about a single town or a single night. It's about the way a nation breathes, inhaling disaster, exhaling denial. Every generation gets its own version of the firestorm, different spark, same smoke. By the time you reach the lake, evening has arrived again. The water reflects the sky in shades of tarnished silver. You park the car, step out, and stand at the edge where the land dissolves into mist. You can still smell the faint trace of chemicals from an old mill upstream. Birds circle lazily above, their reflections trembling with every ripple. You pull out your recorder. For a long moment, you just let the ambient sounds fill the silence. The hum of insects, the gentle lapping of water, the sigh of wind through grass. Then finally, you speak. This is the final entry. The firestorm was not an accident, not entirely. It was a rehearsal for control, a lesson in how to burn the truth without leaving a visible flame. They didn't hide it underground, they built over it. Schools, malls, highways, everyday life laid brick by brick on top of unacknowledged heat. You pause. The recorder clicks softly. The wind changes direction. But sometimes, if you listen closely, in the hum of a transformer, the crackle of a dry forest, the flicker behind your eyelids when you close them too fast, you can still hear it. The country breathing smoke. You stop recording. The tape reels click to a halt. For a moment, you think you see something on the lake's far edge,
a faint glow under the surface, like embers stirring awake. Maybe it's just reflection. Maybe not. You take the letter from your pocket, the one with no signature, and let it fall into the water. The paper darkens, curls, then sinks. The ripples widen, fade. Behind you, the world continues. Trucks rumble down the highway. Televisions flicker through curtains. Life marches on, loud, busy, unbothered. But beneath it all, something ancient keeps whispering, "Remember." You turn off the recorder and walk away. The sound fades into the hum of the night, that same soft frequency that's always been there, hiding in plain sight. And if you listen long enough, you realize it was never just the sound of fire. It was the sound of forgetting.